who told Robert Schuller the story. It happened when the mathematician was a senior at Stanford University, and he came to class one day late. Have you ever been late to anything? After the professor had already handed out the test assignment, and there were 2 problems that were on the board that were not included on the copied test sheet. After an hour, this mathematician had completed the test, but still had not solved the 2 problems that were on the board. After a while, he asked the professor if it was all right to take those 2 problems home and to work on them there. Those 2 problems were really tough, he reported. He worked on them for 3 days straight. Ever do that? Take home something? The one he never did solve. The other one he did. But he said that he had never worked on anything so hard in all of his life. He finally turned his paper in on a Friday morning with that one problem left unsolved. Early on Sunday morning, the professor knocked on his door. How many of you would have been excited to have seen a professor on early Sunday morning while you were in college? The professor was flushed and excited as he showed the student the paper he planned to read at a meeting of the International Mathematics Society. The student was surprised to discover that the paper was about how he had solved an unsolvable problem. You came to class late, the professor explained, and did not know that I had put those 2 problems on the board to illustrate that there are some problems that could not be solved. Not even by Einstein. But you did not know that, and you solved one of them anyway. That resulted in a professorship at the University of California at Berkeley for the young mathematician. He told Schuller, suppose that I had heard the professor say that these were unsolvable problems. Do you think I would have ever tried to solve them? Do you think I ever would have solved the one that I did? As we come into our lectionary text for today, we encounter an unsolvable problem. Yet, it is a problem worth solving. Nearly every epistle, we call them letters in the New Testament, was written to address this problem. What is it? Anybody got a guess? It's church conflict. Ever hear of any? There are so many pastors that are fired or forced out of the pulpit that it amounts to 1 every 6 minutes in the United States alone. There are over 900 denominations of Baptists in the United States. Every mainline church is confronted with the possibility of a split in their denomination almost every time that they get together. But this is not a new problem. James is addressing church conflict in parts of his letter. The end of chapter 3 gives us a contrast of wisdom, of earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. An interesting sidelight to this passage is the fact that James chose to use Greek words that are seldom used elsewhere in Greek literature or in the New Testament. At the risk of being too scholarly, I think it would serve us well to look at those words as they are translated in the New Revised Standard Version. I'm going to refrain from those preacherly comments and just give you the meaning of the words, and you can draw your own conclusion. So I challenge you to take some notes. So you all have a bulletin, and if you don't have another piece of paper, you can take that out and a pen. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. But earthly wisdom, it's characterized as bitter envy. The Greek word translated as envy can be a positive passion or zeal that has gone wrong. Combine this with bitter, which could be interpreted as spiteful or vindictive. Selfish ambition. Before New Testament times, this was only used by Aristotle. It denotes a self-seeking pursuit of office by by unfair means. Boastful. It means to brag about oneself. In comparison with others, there's only one non-biblical usage of this word, and it appears on a monument in Asia Minor, citing a gladiator as he looks over a defeated foe. False to the truth. From this word we get the word pseudo, meaning not real. It may indicate either the innocent propagation of an untruth or a deliberate act of deception. Disorder and wickedness of every kind. It literally means unruliness, the refusal to be ruled or being unwilling to submit to authority. Disorder and wickedness of every kind. Sometimes a mental image of a small one comes to my mind. But heavenly wisdom, it's characterized by the following. Gentleness. This is humility or meekness in the face of potential adversity or trial. It tries to soothe bruised community relationships. Pure. In Greek literature, this is only used for godlike behavior. It must come from God. Peaceable. The Greek word is only used 2 times in the New Testament. It is a peace that must be worked at through spiritual discernment. It does not just happen. And gentle. It's a different Greek word than used for gentleness. It means open. Open to reason. It is a gentle toleration for others in spite of having justification for intolerance. Willing to yield. In the New Testament, this is only used in James, and it means agreeability or compliant. It is willing to allow another's position. Full of mercy. It means to respond to someone else's needs while being cautious that the same thing does not happen to you. Without trace of partiality or hypocrisy, it literally means without doubts about oneself and sincere toward others. It is treating others based on who we are and not based upon who they are. If you took notes, I encourage you to save them. Put them where you can refer to them. Then, when there is conflict, and if we are human, there will be times of conflict. Decide which side is using heavenly wisdom and which side is using earthly wisdom. It will help us to know which side that God would like us to be a part of. 3 days after the beautiful unsinkable ship was out of Queenstown, a wire was received that told of icebergs in the ship's path. The wireless operator ignored the message. After all, he had been told that the ship was unsinkable. So why should he bother? Hours later, another cable came with the same message. The wireless operator heard it, but he failed to write it down. A third message came. This time, the operator wrote it down, handed it to the captain who read it, and without comment turned it over to the managing director of the White Star Line, who looked at it and threw it in the wastebasket on the bridge. An hour later, a 4th warning came. This time the captain said, "Tell the people on lookout to watch for icebergs." That was all that was done. The 5th warning came about 9:30 that evening. Still, there was no slowdown. At 11:30, the crackling sound of another ship was heard in the radio room. "Hey, this is the Californian. I don't know about you, but boy, we are really locked in with an ice field out here." "Shut up," said the radio operator. "You're jamming my airways," and he cut him off. 10 minutes later, the lookout screamed, "Iceberg ahead." But now there was nothing that could be done. It was too late. 1,516 people on the Titanic died because of pride. They thought that they were safe. It couldn't happen to them. They were so busy with their self-indulgence that they didn't even know what to do. Testimony later showed that the lifeboats could have accommodated at least 500 more passengers than what they did. When the announcement came that the ship was in danger and for the people to go to lifeboats, many of them refused to obey the orders. In chapter 4, James is showing us the contrast of pride and prayer. Pride is the way of selfishness that is always wanting more, never being satisfied and looking to take what belongs to others. But prayer, on the other hand, is characterized by submitting to God. By submitting our will to God's will, making God's will ours. Both of these have to do with our attitudes and are closely associated with the characteristics of wisdom that were mentioned earlier. How are we doing? The truth is, no one can answer for you. No one can answer for me. Only I know my true motivations. Only you know your true motivation. But it is here that we must begin to look. If we want our church to continue to be what God desires, are we willing to yield to God and to others? I think that James, through the inspiration, has found the solution for the unsolvable problem. But it's up to us to obey. This morning, in closing, we're going to be singing Pass It On. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. But sometimes we don't allow that fire to glow or grow within us and to be alive to others. Let us pray.